My mother-in-law tried to force me to eat a cake at the celebration of her 25th wedding anniversary, despite my deadly peanut allergy. Now she regrets it, not because of what she did, but because of what my father-in-law did in response. I'm 27 years old and married Frank, who's 30, about a year ago. Before the wedding, we'd been together for 2 years. I'd met his family plenty of times, and we always got along well, until recently. While my husband and I were staying at his parents' house, the topic of kids came up. During a casual conversation, I mentioned that I don't want to become a mother. Frank and I had already discussed this, and we're on the same page about not having children. My mother-in-law, Sharon, who's 52, brought it up over dinner that night. When we made it clear we never planned to have kids, she spent the next few days trying to change our minds, especially mine. She kept pushing me to reconsider, but I finally told her I wasn't interested. That ended the conversation, or so I thought. I'd set my boundaries clearly, but she couldn't seem to accept them. After that, she started treating me coldly and acting strangely whenever she saw me. My father-in-law, Ben, 53, didn't seem to care one way or the other, which I appreciated. I talked to Frank about Sharon's behavior, and he said she was just upset but would eventually get over it since it's not her place to decide whether we have kids. Her being upset wouldn't change our decision. After that talk with Frank, I felt better, especially since we still had to visit his parents because Ben hasn't been well. I decided not to make a big deal out of it and stayed polite and friendly with Sharon, even though she didn't return the courtesy. A few days ago, we attended Frank's parents' 25th anniversary party. Frank's older brother, a surgeon, threw an extravagant celebration, inviting almost everyone we knew, including my own family. We were all having a great time, despite Sharon ignoring me. Then came the moment to cut the cake, a chocolate peanut butter cake. I knew I couldn't have any because I have a life-threatening allergy to peanuts and all nuts. It was a very nutty cake, which, come to think of it, matched Sharon's personality perfectly. She and Ben cut the cake together while everyone clapped. It was a lovely moment. Everyone got a slice, but I naturally didn't take one. None of the guests questioned it since they all knew about my allergy. I didn't even mind not having a piece. But for some reason, when Sharon noticed I didn't have cake, she made a scene. She came over loudly and asked if I was okay, offering me her slice. I politely declined. It struck me as odd that she'd even suggest it. She's known about my allergy for years. Still, she insisted over and over that I try. Just one bite. I kept refusing, reminding her I'm allergic and physically can't eat it. She tried to convince me that a tiny piece wouldn't hurt, but I wasn't about to risk my life. After nearly a minute of back and forth, she snapped, "Oh, just try it!" Before I could react, she shoved the cake into my mouth. I immediately spat it out and asked Frank for a napkin to wipe the remnants off. It was disgusting. I started spitting onto the floor to get it out of my mouth while Frank yelled at his mother. About 30 seconds later, once I'd recovered from the shock of what Sharon had done, I let her have it. I yelled at her, saying her behavior was psychotic and that something was seriously wrong with her. I told her that just because I don't want kids doesn't give her the right to treat me however she pleases, and I wouldn't tolerate it. I didn't care what she thought about my choice not to have children. What mattered was my opinion and Frank's. Trying to trigger my allergy just because I won't give her grandkids was straight up deranged. I knew what was really behind her actions, and I wanted her to know I wasn't afraid of her. She tried to defend herself, claiming she didn't realize my allergy was that serious. It was a blatant lie. She's known me for almost 3 years and has cooked for me plenty of times. She's well aware I'm allergic to all nuts. No one bought her excuse that she didn't know. I told her I didn't believe a word she said and called her a crazy liar. Then Sharon lost her composure. She said she didn't believe me, neither about my allergy nor about her son not wanting kids. She claimed Frank knows she wants to be a grandmother, and would never willingly deny her that joy. She accused me of faking my reluctance to have children, and convincing her son to abandon the idea, probably because I'm infertile. That pushed me over the edge. I grabbed a piece of cake from Frank's plate and smeared it on her face. Without waiting for anyone, I stormed out, got in the car, and thankfully, Frank followed me, along with my parents. They hopped in too, and we drove home quietly. I dropped my parents off at their place. Then Frank and I headed to ours. We didn't speak the whole ride, or even for about an hour after we got home. I guess Frank was waiting for me to calm down before saying anything. That evening, he made me coffee, and we finally sat down in the living room to talk about what happened at the party. I started by apologizing to him. It wasn't my fault, but I still felt awkward about how I'd acted. He said it was fine. He knew I wasn't to blame. Then he filled me in on what happened after we left. Apparently, Sharon started crying once Frank followed me instead of staying to comfort her. She played the victim, and her family jumped on board, calling me all sorts of nasty names and blaming me for trying to steal Frank from her. The only one who called out her nonsense was Ben, which was surprising since he usually stayed out of family drama, especially when it involved his wife. But this time, he took our side. He told Sharon she had no one to blame but herself for Frank leaving with his wife. He said she's always been controlling and couldn't stand it when someone did anything that didn't fit her plans. They got into a huge argument, and all the guests just watched in awkward silence as they went at it. Sharon accused Ben of choosing me over her, and said he was being unreasonable, but Ben stood his ground and didn't back down. They kept arguing until Frank's older brother finally stepped in to break it up. After that, everyone left. The party was pretty much ruined. One of Frank's cousins recorded the fight on her phone, and I was glad to see Ben defending us. She and a few other relatives are supporting us now. But Frank's older brother thinks I should apologize. He says I went too far by airing my personal issues with Sharon on their anniversary and ruining the celebration. They argue I shouldn't have brought it up, and if Sharon forcing the cake on me bothered me that much, I should have just left quietly instead of making a scene. According to them, I caused the fight between Ben and Sharon, and if I'd handled it properly by leaving, no one would have had to witness their blowout. Frank chewed out his brother, saying I'm not apologizing because none of this is my fault. Still, they're all convinced I deliberately ruined Sharon's anniversary by sparking the argument between her and Ben. They say the two of them aren't even speaking now. After their big fight, Sharon packed her bags and went to stay with a friend, and Ben hasn't bothered to call her. Am I wrong for arguing with my mother-in-law on her anniversary over her trying to force me to eat that cake? Let's pause the story here. Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. Now on to the updates. Update 1. Hi. Thanks for all the comments. Frank and I really appreciate your support. Tons of people have said we're not at fault here. I felt a little guilty when I heard Ben and Sharon stop talking after their fight, but reading your comments helped me realize it's not my fault. It's all on Sharon. She ruined her own party by making it about me, or rather, about her issues with me, which is worse. This was supposed to be a celebration of her marriage to Ben, but she decided to try forcing me to eat a cake she knew I'm allergic to. Then, when things escalated, she cried and played the victim, as if she wasn't the one who tried to trigger my allergy just because I won't give her grandkids. She ruined her own celebration, period. I don't owe her anything, no apologies, and certainly no grandchildren. It's been a few days. Frank's older brother and a couple other relatives keep texting him almost daily with unnecessary updates about how Sharon's doing and how miserable she is. It's their way of hinting that we're the cause of her unhappiness. Frank hasn't responded to a single message and just ignores them. He hasn't blocked them though, because he thinks Sharon might lose it completely, and he'd need to know if that happens. Meanwhile, Ben's doing fine. We stopped by to check on him recently, and he doesn't seem bothered by Sharon's absence. He told us he'd kept quiet for a long time, even though he knew she was getting too pushy and controlling. He'd sensed that either Frank or I would eventually snap. He tried warning her a few times, but she never listened. When she started crying at the party after we left, he couldn't take it anymore. He saw right through her. He knew she was fishing for sympathy after messing everything up. So he called her out. As usual, she couldn't handle the truth, so she left. Ben said he knows she's waiting for him to reach out and apologize first, but he's done with that. He's too old to keep saying sorry for speaking his mind, he said. After 25 years of marriage, if she still can't handle the truth from him, maybe they shouldn't be together. Update 2. So, a few things have happened since the last update. First off, Sharon reached out to Frank, demanding to know why he's visiting Ben but not her. Maybe the neighbors saw us stop by and ratted us out, or something like that. Frank told her that since this whole mess was her fault, he thinks his dad needs him more than she does. Sharon took offense, and they got into an argument over the phone. For some reason, she started blaming me for Frank not talking to her, as if she isn't doing a fine job of pushing him away herself. She told Frank it's all my fault, even when he tried to explain that I had nothing to do with it, and it's his own opinion. She wouldn't listen and kept insisting I'm the problem. I told Frank I don't want to deal with her anymore, and if she calls again, he shouldn't bother engaging. He agreed. There's no point in trying to reason with her. The second thing happened last night. We went over to Ben's place, and for the first time, he offered us drinks. Ben usually doesn't drink because of his health issues, so we hesitated, wondering if it was a good idea, but he insisted. Turns out, he'd spoken to a lawyer and was considering divorce. That's a huge step after 25 years of marriage. We asked if he was sure, but he seemed unbothered, almost indifferent. Frank was a bit shaken by the news and needed time to process it, but Ben said it was the best decision he could make under the circumstances. He'd been thinking about it for a while because he'd been unhappy, and Sharon was getting harder to deal with. When we asked how long he'd been considering divorce, we expected maybe a month or two. But he shocked us by saying almost 10 years. He explained that when Frank was 20 and about to finish college, Ben thought that with Frank grown and able to handle his own life and finances, he could join his brother in a new business venture. They'd talked about it for a while, but Ben couldn't commit because he had a family to support, unlike his brother, and he had more financial responsibilities. He couldn't just quit his job to start a business that would take time to turn a profit. After Frank graduated, Ben told his brother he was ready and planned to leave his job. But when he brought it up to Sharon, she shot it down, calling it a terrible idea and forcing him to back off. She argued they couldn't be sure the business would work, and since Frank didn't have a job yet, he might need their support for a couple of years before settling down. Ben tried to convince her, even suggesting he could work part-time in the business while keeping his job, but she made him drop the idea entirely. Now, Ben's brother, who runs the business solo, makes nearly 3 times what Ben does. They still keep in touch, and not a day goes by that Ben doesn't regret listening to Sharon. She didn't even try to discuss it, just gave him an ultimatum. If he took his brother's offer, she'd take Frank and leave him. That made him give up. His brother still wants him to join, but Ben feels he's too old now and plans to retire in a couple of years anyway, so it's not worth it. Frank nearly cried hearing how defeated his dad sounded about those missed opportunities, all because he listened to Sharon, who wouldn't take a chance. Ben's one of the wisest, sharpest people I know. If he's willing to invest in something, it's not a bad idea, and his brother proved it by turning Ben's business concept into a success. Frank suggested he take any role his brother offers, even if it's just for a couple of years before retirement, so he'd at least feel satisfied trying. Ben countered that it's too late and said the job isn't the issue. His brother would make him a partner, but he just doesn't want it anymore. It was tough hearing him talk like that, so Frank and I decided to push back. We urged him to talk to his brother and join him, saying it's never too late to do something for yourself. It was a bit cliché and preachy, but we convinced him to at least reach out to his brother. That's a start. As for the divorce, we'll support him. Sharon can't keep trying to control everyone's lives and think she'll get away with it. How she treated Ben was unfair, and what she did to Frank and me recently was too. She needs to realize she can't bully people into doing what she wants. It's clear now why Ben got so upset when she tried to humiliate us at the party for not following her orders. Even after all this, she has the nerve to act like the victim. I don't feel sorry for her anymore. She's shown she doesn't deserve it. Everyone buying into her tragic victim act is either clueless or just chasing drama. Update 3. Ben and his lawyer filed the divorce papers today, and Frank was there with them. I had a lot of work, so I couldn't join, but I'm glad he's finally living for himself. He deserves to do what makes him happy instead of constantly worrying about what his wife will say or how his son will feel. It's another reason I didn't want kids. I don't think I'm selfless enough to always put someone else first, and I don't think Frank is either. Then, there are people like Sharon, who are selfish and still have kids just to control them and keep themselves above their children. It's been a couple of days, and we haven't heard from her, so I think she's paused the victim act for now, or she's planning a dramatic comeback. Knowing Sharon, I wouldn't rule out the latter. I just hope whatever she's up to doesn't happen before she's served the divorce papers. It'd be awkward if she tries to come back and Ben has to tell her he wants a divorce. I'm keeping my fingers crossed she stays away from us for a few more days. Update 4. A couple of days ago, Sharon got the divorce papers, and, as predicted, she threw a fit. What's wild is she didn't get mad at Ben. She was upset with me. I didn't see that coming because I never thought she'd pin the divorce on me when it's strictly between her and her husband. But I underestimated her. As soon as she got the papers, she went online and posted about how I manipulated Ben into leaving her and how we're all probably celebrating now because I won and she lost. Honestly, I wasn't even competing with her, so I don't get where this whole winner-loser thing came from. It's kind of unsettling to realize she saw me as a rival. She's a bit older than me and is literally my mother-in-law.